welcome everybody. Thank you, Rebecca, for the treats. What I thought, I was talking to Peter yesterday, and what I thought would be good, and Paul agrees, is before we talk about where we're going to head and what our recommendation is be, I think we need to put into context the entire process. That what we're going to do tonight is just one small aspect of a very intricate process involving an end result. And it's not just like what we'll say tonight is going to happen next year or 2 years down the road. This is only a recommendation that we're going to talk about. It is not the final be-all and end-all of everything. Things can happen, minds can change, etc. So I thought, Peter and Steve, it would be good for you to walk us through how this, what we're doing here, is an aspect of the big picture and what that big picture is.
Okay. So the couple things, and I'll try to type and do this. The simplest thing is, ideally at the end of tonight, we reach consensus around a recommendation to the school committee, right? And there's been some discussion about whether that consensus is one specific choice or a first choice and a second choice. The argument against a first choice and a second choice is we're sort of hedging our bets a little. The advantage of the first and the second choice or priority is we are hedging our bets a little. Right? So I leave it to the group to decide what we want to do with that. But when Bill called me yesterday, maybe it was the day before yesterday, he asked me to bring the MSBA overview. So I want to share that, and there are lots of copies of it, so everybody can have one. And then when you have it in hand, I'll talk through it a little bit. So the way I like to think about it is, you know, like the NCAA Final Four, and they don't just let 64 teams play, but they let 70-something teams play, so there are a couple of play-ins to get into the bracket. Well, the basketball people in the group get it, and everybody else doesn't. I'm sorry about that. But really, what I'm trying to say is, as you're looking at the sheet, where the sheet starts, right? So the top thing in the top left corner is this little blue square that says submit a statement of interest. So we've done that. We did it a year ago. Steve and I are about to upload it again in the next couple of days. But we're even before the statement of interest. Like we're the and we'll get to in the sec, but we're like a early version of a building committee, and from a state perspective, there are all sorts of things there, right? So we're submitting the statement of interest, and then assuming it gets accepted, and we would likely hear about that in December, then the whole process starts again, and it goes through all these steps. Right, so there's the preparation, and really that's what we've been doing a lot of is preparation. Then there's an initial compliance certification. And
can I stop you there? What does that mean, initial compliance certification?
That's sort of the back and forth with the state and the MSBA around data. Okay. Right, all the stuff, and I'll go through it in more detail, but are we eligible for the limited number of projects they're gonna do, right? So, and it varied. I looked over the last several years. I think on the low end they did 12 new projects a year, and on the high end they did 17, right? And what I think happened the last time was we got pretty far, but if last year they did 12, then I'm guessing we might have been in the 14 to 20 range on the list. Right, so the hope is that with those 12 ahead of us done or in process, that we move up. And while we've done some work, our need remains largely the same. And part of the argument we're going to make is some other interesting things that happened. Right, so I'll go back to that after we go through this. So then we form the school building committee, and there are very specific rules about who's on the building committee and who it represents. And the school committee appoints that building committee, and my recollection from the last time is that it's typical to have faculty, parents, community members, people with backgrounds in very specific things, like a architect is one, or somebody in the building trades. They like to see elected officials, which could either be school committee members or finance or select people from any one of the communities. And I think the definition's broad, so it could be, if there was somebody on the library committee and they were interested, like that would be appropriate. Then the next big driving thing is determining the educational profile and the enrollment process, right? How big the proposed school is going to be, because the size of the school drives almost everything, right? There's a formula, and the number we discussed earlier in this group that I imagine will come up again in the formal process is very close to where we are now, somewhere in the mid 500s, right? It might be 550, it might be 540, it might be 570, but somewhere in that range. Then they do an analysis of maintenance and capital planning documents. This is a lot of the paperwork that Steve's responsible for. All the things over forever and what that means, right? When were the furnaces, if ever, replaced? When were they upgraded? When were where are we in the context of water and how we get our water? All of those things, and on and on and on. And then the next step is with the check next to it, the local authorization of funding, right? So in this process, we start defining a range of what the scope would be and all of that.
The local authorization of funding, is that through the school committee, or is that each town? Is that an election, or how is that?
I don't think the local authorization is the first vote. I think it's at another level. I need to check on that. I want to be careful about my words because I want to misspeak. So then the next level, and it really goes into what's their module 2 and 3, is the selection of who's going to do the work, and then the feasibility study and schematic design. Right? And that's when the architects come in and they make a very specific plan and work to cost it out. This is where I think, and I'll check this, but I think that the next one, funding the project, is the bigger, the town votes. Right, and probably all of you have read the paper, but the Wacona thing passed, interestingly, by 88 votes, which isn't a lot of votes, but there may be something to learn in how they did it. And it was financially, it's really interesting because the tax impact in Dalton was pretty high, and the impact in some of the other communities was very small. And then Cummington, which is trying to exit itself from the district, was upset about the whole process. But in aggregate, it passed. And then it goes one level deeper, and this is the scope monitoring. So detailed design, construction, completing the project, and then the project's completed. So where those little peoples, or little groups of people, those are times when the MSBA board approves each part of the process. And where there's the check mark, it's the district vote. And looking at this now, I think the first one is just at the school committee level, and the second check mark is the broader public vote. Okay. So I think this is important just for context. This is potentially where we're going, assuming that SOI gets approved, and we won't really know about that till December. Any questions about that?
Peter, real quick, if the MSBA was to accept us in the very beginning, our statement of intent, at some point in the process, could they stop and say, no, things are going in the wrong direction, things are not going? Because you have the schematic shows a couple of checkpoints, like in the feasibility study and the schematic design, like say it gets to module 3 or 4 and they're realizing that.
To my knowledge, and I'll check this, I don't think they've ever stopped something permanently. I think they may have said it's time to take a breath and let's work through this together, but I don't think you get halfway through and they pull the rug out from under.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't asking that, maybe I said, I guess the question was like, say you got halfway through the feasibility study and we were proposing a new school and they came and said, no, that's not gonna work. Could they change the focus?
Yeah, I could probably answer that, because Peter, if you remember, each time we went down there, we had 3 votes, and it was all voted on down there. But quite honestly, everything's decided, negotiated ahead of time.
Okay.
And when they're satisfied, and Steve or Peter can correct me, when they're satisfied that we're reached a milestone, then they invite us down to have this vote. They make the recommendation. There always could be someone on their board who votes no on it, but it's pretty well assured that their staff, and that's who handles this, is happy with where we are, and we've reached a milestone.
Yeah. So I think what Steve's saying is that they adjust the timeline to where you're at, so there may be schools that are moving faster through the process, and there may be ones that are moving slower, but once they make that initial investment, they want to see it successful because their money's tied up in that, right? Because they only did 12 or they only did 17, and I think they're held. They're spending a lot of money, so I think they're held to a very high standard.
And it's my understanding that at some point, I don't know where, and maybe Steve, you can answer this, is they force you to look at every option.
That's the feasibility.
That's the feasibility study. So the idea that somebody could say that, oh, we never looked at this, would
Right.
not be factually correct, because of the fact, under the guidelines, we have to look at every option.
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other things about this that people are aware of? I think contextually it's important, but right.
Okay. Next.
So I know many of you did these and actually have completed ones from Carl, who's unable to be here. But I made additional copies, and if anybody needs one. What's slightly different on this one is instead of making 2 different sets and having to pass them around, I just wrote on this one renovation addition or new school and put in circle 1. So you could you could use it for either. So those will go around in case people need those. And then I think, and I defer to the chairs on this, but what I would hope we could do tonight is to reach consensus around a way we want to go, right? So some of us are going to lean one way, and some of us are going to lean the other way. And consensus doesn't mean it's a unanimous vote. And there are lots of definitions of consensus, but consensus means you can support the broader decision of the group, right? So there are lots of different ways we can, and those will come around. But there are lots of different ways we can do this. We could go around and people could individually say which way they're leaning. We could do a straw poll to narrow conversation and then get to something. Recently, and I'm not necessarily recommending this, but I was involved in a hiring process in another district. And it was so complicated that people felt uncomfortable voicing their opinion. So they did like a secret ballot to give me feedback. I don't think we're in that place where we need to do a secret ballot to give feedback. But that's an option too. So I'm open to anything, and what I'd actually like to do is stop talking and take notes, and let the chairs move that forward in whatever way they
How do you want it
think
to work?
makes sense.
Let people chime in,
Okay.
whoever wants to
Who
start.
wants to go first? As I said at the last meeting, I'm not one for going in order, because usually people at the end then feel some sort of maybe pressure, either psychologically or whatever it is. So I'm more for who wants to start, okay?
And if nobody wants to start, I could read Carl's feedback.
Alright.
Because he's not here, and that's easy to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Okay.
No, but Michelle's there, so
Before
do
you
you
begin, may I
Yeah.
just ask a
Yeah.
question? I see the approach, you have renovation addition and then new school.
Yeah.
And there was quite a bit of discussion on a model school, which I thought was
Right.
really exciting.
Mhm.
And, so I don't see that as an option because I think it is different from a new, as a voter, I would look at a model school different than I would at a new school. Even though they're a new school, it's a new school.
In my mind, the new school was a model school,
Yeah.
but maybe I was.
No.
I
it
was
wasn't.
wondering then
I
if
don't
you,
know.
as a voter, if you go around the table and you're just, I'd like to, like, instead of just saying new school, because I think that is going to make a difference. It would make a difference to me. I saw that as a third option, a hybrid option.
The problem with that is that at this point, I'm not sure, that's covered in the MSBA.
Right, the model school program that, I'm guessing Sharon talked to you about that when you and
Mhm.
Bill and Sharon sat down.
Yep.
and
No, it was
formed all
during when
function.
John Winnick.
John Winnick.
Oh, John
Okay.
Winnick was
Alright,
here.
so you're aware that that's not really a formal program right now, but he thinks it may be coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
that-
I'd like to hear
yeah.
some discussion of how people feel about that.
I think it's a great idea if there are the incentive points associated with it. Otherwise, I don't really see why you would do that, because there isn't really a savings associated with it, as far as
I
I
thought it was the architectural.
I mean, I think that what you're saying makes sense. There may be some minor savings in art design, right?
Yeah, I don't know that they're offering that though.
Good.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know that they're offering the blueprints for the model building if the program isn't there.
Exists.
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe they are, and if they are, then that would make sense,
It's
because
just
there's
at
some
that meeting,
savings
there
there.
was extensive discussion on
Yeah.
that, and I actually was very excited
Yeah.
about it.
I was
And
too.
this seems almost like a flip to that discussion, so I'm a little taken
Agreed.
aback.
The woman who I talked to, who was the head of the guidance department here, and is now on the West Springfield, school committee, Pat Grabarczyk, she headed the building committee when West Springfield built their new school. Now, the school was over 1,000 students. There's two things that she emphasized to me when I asked her after the last meeting, Michelle.
Mhm.
Because I was driving home and I suddenly realized, my God, John Whitaker used the West Springfield model, which he passed around for us to see.
Mhm.
They did look at the model school, and I believe there was at that point, some acceptance from the MSBA. From what John said that night, he said something about, well, they're not doing that anymore. Pat said to me that John is very much in tune with the MSBA, and that we should push that. We should tell John, let's see if we can get the MSBA to do that. What can he do to help us in that area? And Pat found him very helpful because he was the consultant to West Springfield and worked with her. And they went to a high school where it basically, I had made the comment ignorantly about it being like a prefab school. No, it's not. It's using models from another school, architectural designs and plans from another school that would copy, in a sense, what West Springfield wanted. And she said there are tweaks if you go to a school where the entrance to the model school was not what this school built. They moved a staircase, she said, from the front to the back. And she asked that question, and the person said, oh, we didn't like where the staircase was, so we could move it, but we used lots of the other plans. So it's that type of thing. And I would love to do that. I'd love to see if we can push that. But I'm not sure, you know, if that's a question mark, does that inhibit us in what we have to do in making a recommendation? If we make a recommendation that would include, for example, let's say we recommend a new school, can we then say we should really seriously look at the model school?
Well, I think you could qualify, I mean, the recommendation is the groups to make, right? You make any recommendation you want, and then qualify the recommendation with another thing. We're interested
Okay.
in this with this
As
purple bow on top,
Right,
right?
yeah.
And the purple bow could be the model school,
Right.
or the purple bow could be, I don't know,
Okay.
windmills,
Yeah.
right? There's lots of discussion of windmills.
Yeah. Okay. Who wants to?
Well, I don't,
Okay.
Jim, or?
because of what I was going to say was my decision, what I came to is exactly what we just been talking about for 5 minutes here. After a lot of hair pulling for the last few days, my conclusion was to go with a new building. But like Michelle, with the caveat that we look strongly, or recommend strongly, that the mounts buildings we look at. The obvious, to me, the advantages to the new building are obviously that it's new, you know, you get what you want. From the educational impact, there's, I mean, I gave it a 5 right now, you know, for that. Cause all of the areas with that we want, and there are that, you know, the school wants, they would get. Safety, again, I gave it a 5 because you're building a brand new building, you're gonna do it the right way. Cost, I gave that a 4. The one that I really had trouble picking any number for was the last one, political feasibility. Cause I still have strong feelings about us having an issue getting it passed. Dalton passing by 88 votes to me is not really, you know, sound.
Except the town of Dalton, interesting, the vote was 1,011 to 700 and I believe 77. So it passed in Dalton by 300 votes.
And I did have a question after reading, you know, the last week in the newspapers about the Dalton area, and I wanted Peter to maybe elaborate a little bit on it. They went with what they call the popular vote and not the town, you know, individual
Yeah.
town. What? Hmm?
I think you have to.
As I
Is that what we have to do?
Yeah, that's what we did in the last 2.
No.
But
No.
do you have to do it?
No, it was an aggregate vote, but each town had to pass it by the proposition
The
2.5.
2.5.
Right.
No.
The total vote was.
No, they,
You
they,
could talk about
I tell you something, it passed, and now it's up to each town to fund it. And they have, if they don't pass 2.5, they're gonna have to cut their fire, whatever, they're on the hook for it. So they decided a popular vote. The main reason was, Gary Campbell, was on the committee. He's the football coach. He doesn't live in Dalton, but he's one of the committee. He was quoted as saying, they knew Cummington was not gonna vote for it. So if every town had to approve it, it was dead in the water. So the only other option they had was, to pile all the votes from all the towns together and then have a grand vote. Because if it was 6 out of the 7 towns said yes and Cummington said no, because they wanna leave the district anyway, then it was dead in the water. So that's why he said, I was reading it online, that they did it this way instead of each town passing.
So my understanding, I agree with that, and my understanding is the school committee structures it how they want to. So the school committee could structure it, yeah.
But the last time we went through this process, it was the individual towns, correct?
It was,
By
yeah,
law.
each town had to vote for it, and then each town had to vote for
Right.
the
Funding.
funding as well.
So where did we vote it down? I don't remember, where did
I
we
thought it
vote
was
it
an
down there?
aggregate vote.
Great Barrington.
I know Barrington did, but was it
Just
the first
the-
vote or the second vote?
Just the funding.
The
The
fund,
2.5
the
override.
majority
Everybody
voted
liked,
for it,
said we
but
need a project, they liked the
didn't vote
project.
for the funding,
but the
okay, I couldn't remember that.
Yeah.
That was just the first, second vote.
failed worse than the first one, in the same category, if you will.
See, I thought it was an aggregate vote.
Maybe it was, but I know from.
I thought that's cause
But for
that's
that-
what
for
was.
their reason, because they asked why they didn't, each town voted. And I remember it just struck out because it said, well, Cummington's not gonna vote for it.
It was each town.
It was each time?
Yeah, I think we made the political decision
Yeah.
that if each town didn't pass it,
Yeah.
that we weren't
We
gonna
shouldn't
force
do
it
it.
on the other
Exactly.
towns.
That's right. That's right.
So in that vote, it all had to be all three.
All three.
In
That's
in
my
both
memory.
areas, both the vote for and Proposition 2.5.
Yeah, and that was my memory.
Okay. Because the Central Berkshire didn't go that, it was a total vote.
Right.
That's why I found the Dalton vote interesting, because Dalton is the taxpayer, that's the burden, because they have the most kids involved. And so they passed it by
66% of the
right, and they
finance.
passed it by 300 votes.
And while 88 votes ain't a lot of votes, when I read that it passed there, I felt slightly more optimistic
Well,
for
yeah, I
us
did too, but
than
I-
if it hadn't passed.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my takeaway, I mean, not to derail, but I mean, Dalton only has a taxable base of like 612 million. When Great Barrington has $1,000,000,049, Stockbridge is 890. So when Dalton's a considerably less prosperous town than Great Barrington, Stockbridge is significantly less so than Great Barrington. I did not think it was gonna pass, so I was surprised.
Okay. Did you, and the actual scores, and at the end, if people want, I can collect all of the things that we have as backup. And I'm not doing a giant tally of all the scores, but did you want to share one
Oh,
for the
yeah.
feasibility?
I had a 22 out of 25 for the new building, is that what you?
No, just, did you have a political feasibility?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, I gave it a 3.
Hmm?
Yes. I'm being optimistic.
Mine is similar to Jim's.
Okay.
We had very similar things. I also had a 3 for political feasibility. I had 5 for everything else, including cost, because I felt like, again, I was jumping to the conclusion that would get an incentive for model school, which I know is kind of stretching it, but I'm optimistic too. I also felt like, the difference, we are going to be spending a large chunk of money to renovate at the very least. For a little more than that, we can build new, and I think we will get a building that lasts a lot longer. So I was thinking about just the long-term savings and the long-term impact and, that aspect. I also, since we can add whatever else we want, as Peter said, to the plan, I also really think that no matter what the recommendation is, it should include a correction of the entrance to the school, so that that's joined with, Monument Valley Road. I think that's really, really important to include in the plan, and I know that that's out of our own pockets or whatever, but I think that that's how we get that resolved.
Yeah, not the building entrance, but the road.
The road,
driveway.
yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, yeah.
Yes, yes.
Someone else?
So my total was 23.
Roger?
I came out on the renovate side. I figured on educational impact, I gave it a 4. On safety, my reasoning, I gave it a 5. My reasoning being that if we're gonna renovate the school, the phrasing of this is addressed most of all safety concerns, but would presume the design would address most. Takes advantage of many saving incentives, I gave it 4. On political feasibility, I gave it 4. And frankly, the only difference between that and new school is I gave political feasibility a 2 on the new school. And not included in this rubric, but in my mind is, I just can't envision either tearing down this building or leaving it to the town to try to figure out what to do with it. I think that's gonna be a big negative. So,
No, I think we got enough of
you know,
those things.
I graduated from Swan High School, it's still sitting down there as a hulk, and much as we know needs to be done to this building, who in the world is gonna want it if it's no longer a school? So, that was mine. So I gave, the renovation, my score came out to 21, and the new came out to 19. The biggest difference, political feasibility.
Someone else?
And you go, I'll just, I'll interrupt, and I'll share Carl's feedback,
Okay, yeah,
right, cause I
yeah.
gotta share it at some point. So Carl is, leaning towards the new school. He thought the educational impact was an 8, and the 2 others were 5, safety and cost, but the political feasibility is a 3. And so his math added up to 21 out of 25. What? It's double.
4 times 2.
4 times 2.
Double the education, oh, times 2, I missed that little thing.
Yeah.
I like where you're getting 25 from.
Does that make sense
Sorry,
now?
yes, it
Yeah.
makes perfect sense
It's
now.
a bigger box, more points.
Yes.
That's,
About that.
that's the
Your
intent.
score just changed, right?
Yes, it sure did.
And he's not so psyched about the renovation, in part because he thinks he had 2, because we're getting dinged on incentives. The educational opportunity he only sees as a 6, and he thinks that, it'll only partially address the safety concerns, so he gave it a 3. And the likelihood of passing, he saw as a 4, so that's Carl's thoughts. And then on his comments were, the advantages, just reiterating what other people have said, but, we'll meet nearly all education facility needs, a 50-year, expected life, flexible space, layout accommodating future needs, and the 2 disadvantages are tougher to sell to the public and the higher costs to taxpayers. And the renovation, lots of compromises in terms of mission and physical facilities, might only have a life of 25 years, where all new would be 50 years. But the cost is more likely to be acceptable to voters as an advantage. So, I think he's saying much of what people are saying on both sides of it.
Someone else?
Okay,
Ma'am?
I got the same score on both, actually.
Okay.
But I realized that when I was trying to answer the questions, I didn't have enough information. So I came to look at the school and I walked around, especially in the CBTE areas.
Diane, could you speak a little louder?
Sure, I came to look at the school because I got the same numbers in both. And I couldn't really figure out how to make the choice. So I came to look at the school. And I came especially to look at the CBTE areas because I think that is the thing this school is lacking. And so my real question was, can you do a renovation with what is here in CBTE? And so I went to look at the back and I walked around with Sean. And I thought that you could do it with a renovation because I was thinking about what Dan said about a foundation and how much that costs. And the placement of this school in the best spot on this hill. And then I came upon Lucy Doran. And she had all of these very old blueprints on the wall. And the kids were trying to figure out how to renovate the school. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So I talked to her just for a little bit. But I tried to look at the school and think about a renovation as I walked through. And the things that bothered me were things that could be, I think, ameliorated with renovation. The question was, where do you put all the kids when it's being renovated? Because you want to do it as fast as you can, but you want to do it right. And so I had thought about maybe having the kids go to the Southern Berkshire School, which might serve a lot of purposes. One, they have room. 2, the kids could get to know each other, and it might forge and 3, you could probably get it done much easier and less toxically to kids here. And even though it would be a disruption for a few years. And that was the big sticking point, I thought. If you could actually make the school what you wanted to with CVTE, then if those teachers were okay with it, I would ideally like to go back and ask them. And, but I thought that was the sticking point with me is the CVTE. Plus the ceilings in this building, you just have to blow the whole thing off, you know, and put in some windows and, but I think I went in my heart with renovation because those were the ways I could answer most of my questions and get what I wanted from what I think is the most important thing about this building. And is the light, the safety, and the ability to serve the students. And if you can get those things, I think it'll be not a bad thing to renovate it. Plus, you know, what do you do with the building? And I'm not into waste. So, but if you can get all of those things, maybe a little cheaper, and still have it look pretty good. I mean, why couldn't you put a model school, why couldn't you do a model school on a foundation that you've got in a way that works on this site and include all the things that you want? I've never been conventional, nor am I unafraid to bend rules. I am a rule bender at heart. To get what you need. And I saw a very nice model in there that I thought was really, made me think a lot about windows and light and places for kids to be that didn't look all that much different than what we've got. That really made me think a lot more about renovation. It's always easier to tear something down and build something new. I think it just takes a little more thought.
Did you ask the kids when you were here about what you said about them going to Mount Everett?
No. No, that was something that I just came up after I went through.
And somebody might wanna ask Mount Everett. What's going on, Mount Everett?
But it was just a thought that I had, cause that was the thing that bothered me, you know, not, if you're not into waste, you don't wanna buy a trailer. You know, how do you make the money that you're gonna spend work in the school that you want it to be? So you don't wanna spend money on trailers that you're not gonna use again. And you don't want to spend extra money that you could put into a program otherwise, that's just more waste. You don't wanna take down trees that you don't have to take down. You don't wanna destroy fields that you've already got. And you wanna put it in a place like this. So how can you build a new school? Where would you build? I just couldn't figure out where I would rather have a new school other than right on the place that the other school is. So if you can use this, why not use it? It's in the perfect spot.
So, are you saying to renovate the school or tear it down and build a new school on this footprint?
Well, I would say that was where I was, I would ideally like to renovate it,
Okay.
but I think in renovating it, when I think about all of the things that are lacking when I walked around, and that teachers have curtains closed because it's cold, rather than seeing out of the windows, they have to keep that closed, and that there are a lot of entry points where people can enter the school. So you can't have any light because it's cold. So you have to sort of get rid of the window. And then if you get rid of the window, you know, where's the wall? And then the ceilings are so low, so you really have to get rid of that. And so I think in renovation, you're almost talking about a new school. But can it be done with the things that Dan says are so costly? Can you use a foundation? Can you use parking lots, which we've heard are so expensive? Can you figure out how to route it, put the route that way? Can you put a wonderful front on it, like we saw in some of the old designs that I borrowed from your office? This beautiful glass library that you could put on the front. You could make it secure, but it's looking out this way. I don't think that if you take a different site on this piece of property, you're gonna get the same kind of a thing. I mean, it's sort of like renovating your house. you know, you don't wanna, you wanna put it on the best spot you can. And you wanna do the things that you wanna do, but maybe keep it as similar as you can, if you can. You can take down some walls, you can raise the ceiling, you can put things on the sides. There's plenty of room around the back there to put plenty of CBTE things on the back, plenty of garages and walls that can be removed, and places inside the physical plant that are very dark, that if you remove some walls and make them part of a structure that goes to the outside. This is what a lot of the kids were saying, that a lot of those central rooms, classrooms, are very dark, there are no windows. You know, there's, take down walls.
Cause I'm the note taker, I'm trying to make sense of all this, ask you a blunt question
Mhm.
that may or may not make sense.
Mhm.
If I were to categorize what you were saying, and we're trying to figure out new school or renovation,
Mhm.
and I want that in one of those two boxes,
Mhm.
what I'm hearing you say is you want many of the things with a new school, but you wanna repurpose the foundation and site here. If you were the note taker, which box would you put?
Good question.
Dan, from a building perspective, what would that be?
I don't, everybody has the same question. Your points are well taken, but
That's why I
well,
couldn't decide,
new
'cause I
vintage.
wanted,
well, I think.
yeah.
The kids that you were talking about that were looking at the prints, were they leaning towards
Yeah.
renovation?
Renovation.
Really?
They
Yeah.
they were all renovation based.
Renovation is a very broad term. Renovation, I
That's-
mean, if you leave,
I'm
if you leave
confused with
that
this,
wall right
yeah.
there, tear everything down, you've renovated the building.
And if you
that's
leave the
kind of what you're
foundation.
yeah, it's kind of what you're talking about, so.
Yeah.
I guess essentially.
My
that's
understanding is that
Is renovation,
with
yeah.
a renovation, because there's no sprinkler systems and everything would have to be brought up to code, you could keep the foundation and the brick, I guess, but the walls would have to be replaced to be double pane so that they can insulate heat, and the roof would obviously have to be replaced, so it sounds like everything's gutted, but you keep the shape of the original school.
Shell.
So, right, the shell. I think the value of that would be that there's some iconic, understanding of the school, given that it's been part of the community's history for so long. And that's why, I mean, for me, I came out on renovation mostly because for the first and second category, both scored the highest that they could for me, because it seems like in either way, you have to fully redesign what you're either fully redesigning a monument and you take all of these considerations into account, what we see the educational vision being and how to deal with safety, given these floor-to-ceiling windows. And if you're building a new school, of course, you take these things into account. And so with pricing, with cost, I put renovation at 4.5 and new at 3, simply because I thought there would be a fee, like an architectural fee, that you wouldn't have to do. I guess my confusion around that was if you do a model school, it would be cheaper because you wouldn't have to pay that architectural fee, because you're just taking another person's design. But I didn't have enough information about what that would be or how much it would cost. And then the political feasibility, I rated renovation slightly higher because I just have a feeling that if we made that proposal and came up with a compelling design around renovation, the community might be more support of that, given that it's slightly cheaper, and that you have the opportunity to, in a renovation, highlight the current educational capacities the monument does have in the pitch. So you say the CBTE program is really good, and that's where the money for the renovation is going, is to enhance those programs and the space for those programs. Whereas a new school, I think I don't know, again, this is like, I'm ignorant in these domains, but finding another school that puts that much emphasis on automotive shop and has that kind of thing, even if it's a model school, I just don't know if those exist. And I think there's something to be said about working with an architectural firm that works with the community around designing, renovating the school, catering to the needs of the community. That's where I came out. Just to say, it's most of the reason why the students are choosing renovation is because I think it's more educationally compelling to think about to think critically about the education that they're currently in and sort of remodel it that way. And it's much harder to sort of create a fantastical school from the ground up. But I think the students also feel like they've talked about the political feasibility and sort of making sure that costs are low. And I think the community would just respond well to seeing that, whatever team is deciding this give some thought as to how you could redesign Monument without sort of throwing out and building a new school.
Someone else?
I'll hop in.
Okay.
I got, for new school, I got 20 points, and for renovation, I got 15, so I came down on new school. Just going side by side, for the educational impact, I think the new school would be a 4. I don't think realistically it would be a 5, because that would be everything we want to get, and so I think many would be appropriate, but not all. For the renovation, I just got a 3 for that one, because I don't think that we'll be able to get nearly as much bang for our buck with renovation as we would with new. Safety, I have a 5 for a new school, just because although nothing is perfectly safe, I mean, obviously with the new school, it's gonna be as safe as possibly can. With renovation, I came out with a rated at a 3, because no matter what we do, there's always gonna be the footprint and the blueprint of this school, and I just don't, with the layout, central offices, cameras, etc., I still don't think it's gonna be nearly as safe from that standpoint. Cost, the cost is gonna be, I took a 4 for the new school, 3 for the renovation, just because of the incentives and like what was mentioned before, I was really, my new school, I was really interested in the model school, and that was really, I'm glad Michelle brought that up, that was something that I think would be well done to take advantage of. And then finally, as far as political feasibility, which, really this is the bottom line for me. I mean, if I thought that, even though I don't, everything else added up for renovation was less than, but I thought that politically it would be more likely to pass, I would probably be able to get behind the renovation. But I think that I rated them both a 3. I think they have a close chance of passing, but it's going to be a significant effort. Obviously, the new school is going to cost more, so that's obviously a negative right off the bat. However, I think that politically, the new school, if you're going to renovate and you're going to ask the towns to pay how many was it, $14 million more than they would have if they passed it the last time. So we want you to pay 42 or 45 million now, where you could have gotten it for 28 million. I think that's just a very, very hard sell. And I don't think it's impossible. And if we throw in all the bells and whistles of the new CBTE and all these, make it significantly different than our previous proposal, that might make it a little bit more politically viable. But I just think we're starting from a really, really bad place, considering that we're asking how much the cost has increased from our last go around to try to from a political point, renovate and ask the community to pay for something significantly more. I just don't, I think that the negative of that outweighs the positives with respect to if we had a new school, it's gonna be a totally different pitch, totally new aspect, and so to me that they came down evenly, which I was kind of surprised. Just going back as far as advantages and disadvantages for the new school, obviously a higher cost, and the big thing also what I think a lot of the students is people's sentimental attachment in the communities to the old school. So I think those are things that we have to overcome. But also this is a 50-year-old building, so I think how much renovation we do, there's still going to be problems that come up no matter how much was done during the renovation that you're not going to have with the new school. So again, there's no guarantees, but I think statistically you're likely to have more problems 15, 10, 20 years from now with renovation than you were with a new school. And that's about all I have.
Jason, when you say the new school is more expensive, is that what you're saying?
So just going, from.
Well, when you, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, from what John Winokur presented.
Well, when you look at the net cost, are you including the net cost in the fact that there's no state money for renovation?
Well, not renovation, I meant renovation slash addition, or renovation, what was that, renovation and addition. So there is state money. I completely discounted just renovation, but what he presented was 3 scenarios. Renovation was number 1, which I think everyone can basically, I mean, that's just.
Well, that's the question.
But
I
the
was-
renovation with renovation and addition is what we did last time. What
Yeah.
was presented, and that is eligible.
Oh, your combination of the things.
Renovation, yes.
Okay.
So basically.
But just a straight renovation without doing.
Right, I mean, out of
There's
the
no
3
money for
choices, I
that.
think
Repair.
that renovation is completely off, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but that's completely off the table. So there's either renovate with addition, like what was proposed last time, or completely new, that's what I.
So you're not talking about just repairing the building?
Right.
Okay, you're talking
Similar to what
about
was done before.
the last
or-
time.
Exactly.
With the addition of a STEM building or.
Right, yeah, or,
something.
you know, CBT.
Just to clarify, that's what I was talking about too, not just.
Yeah.
We're all talking,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
I'm like renovation is out the window.
Yeah,
Are
I
we
think,
here
I agree.
renovation, are we talking addition? So I missed the last
We're talking
two.
renovation, addition,
And that
Or-
is one.
and new.
Yes.
And new.
And I think, I
The
don't want to.
third one, I think we're not talking about is just a repair.
A repair, right,
Right.
which we saw conservatively was $51 million.
To just repair
To
this building.
just repair the
Did
building.
no money.
And bring it up to code.
And there's no money.
And there's no money in it
No,
for that.
no, so that would fall on basically
On tax-
all 3 towns. And that's,
I just wanted, because I was totally confused, because I was hearing renovation, and I said, because I'm out in the community and I'm talking to people, and people are very supportive of the CBTE. And when I went here, the automotive, everything didn't quite meet the needs when I went here 100 years ago, right, Steve? So, but, so.
Weren't you still starting cars by cranking them?
Yeah, that's it, you know, with those bicycles with the big tires up the mountain. But, no, people are saying the time, between the second effort and the effort now, there's more awareness about CBTE. And I know people I talked to went to school here and everything, and they said there's no way you can do that without an addition. It's just not going to work, to do it right. And so I think when people are talking in the community or the press is reporting this or whatever, saying renovation, I think is going to fall flat and everything, because I've gone to people, if you want CBTE, there's no way that can be done in the existing building. You can't slap new faucets on the sink and call it a day, it's not going to. And I'm hearing positive feedback on that, but just sitting here and people were talking renovation, you lost me on that until Jason clarified it. Then no, we're talking renovation and addition, I think that's really important. Yeah.
So, kind of dovetailing off of what, Michelle's saying, I, like Diane, I came up with the same number, and partially because the way I kind of look at this rubric, at least it's kind of like a standardized test, they try to squeeze everything and try to make everything fit into something, but there's a lot to it, and it kind of goes to what Michelle's saying is,
Everybody, hold on to your hats. It's gonna get complicated.
Because when we talk about, I think there's, and I don't want, it seems to me that there might be this preconceived notion that when we talk about renovation addition, we're talking about basically rolling out the same plan that was last time. But addition could mean a 50,000 square foot addition. I mean, it could mean a new school attached to this school to accomplish what you're needing. So, I mean, to say that you can't accomplish everything in a renovation that you could in a new school is you know, it's almost being a little biased, you know.
I think it's a conservative, with particularly taxpayers in Great Barrington, a conservative addition to the school. We talked about this.
Right.
And, because I know people do want that CBTE, I do know that. But are they going to approve a huge, massive addition?
Well,
they're not.
well, that gets me to
Yeah, so.
the rest of my rubrics. So.
Get back to the rubric. Go, Steve, go.
So, anyway, so,
Now
so,
we
but,
know what the
but.
word means.
Yeah, right. So for the new school, I did have a, you know, that it would be able to afford all of the things. So I had a 5 for safety and educational impact. We're in renovation addition, I had a 8 and a 4, respectively. But my question was, before I go any further, was Mount Greylock did a renovation and addition, correct?
Yes.
What, do we know what they did with their students while
They see.
the renovations were going on?
I think.
Send them mine.
No, I think, and I need to check this, I think they existed in their old space, and then when they built the new space, then they shut down the old space and tore most of it
It's
down.
a big addition.
I was
Was
up
it big
there,
addition, so-
it was.
Yeah.
So I think they literally put all the
They
kids in the
rotated
new
the
building
students.
and then
Yeah.
just.
We were able to do
I
that.
think so.
See, because one thing that Bill's been saying is the impact on, not just the students, but the teachers, their
Yeah.
ability to teach. And if
Yeah.
teachers aren't being able to afford to teach to their best of their abilities, this is, we're kind of losing something here, right? So I think if I was looking at a renovation addition, it would have to be significant enough where it would be able to have, fit the CBTEs. Again, I think most people in this room, I think, like you, I think is a huge, huge asset to this building. I mean, the education plan going forward, but it would also have to be done in a way that would be the least impact on teaching. But the but in all this is the last two, cost and political feasibility. Now, if you look at the incentives that the MSBA offers in a renovation addition, I categorize that as a 5 because we would be able to take advantage of all the incentives that are available. Assuming that we, of course, are gonna try to get Richmond, yeah, but that, I guess that works for either one. And then where new school, I only said 3 because it doesn't, because when you lose some of the incentives that the MSBA is, and plus I think there's other costs associated with more design fees probably. And engineering fees and things like that, and non-reimbursable projects. So it comes down to the last thing. I think whatever we choose is gonna be an uphill battle, for sure. I think everybody kind of agrees with that. I think if we're gonna go with a renovation addition, and we emphasize the CBTE, and we could get an addition that satisfies those needs, but still cost-effective, reasonable, then I think that would probably be a 3. Whereas I think a new school, because I think even though it might get us almost or everything we wanted, that's what we said, almost everything we want, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still a hard number for people to swallow. I think because when we're talking, what was the Central Berkshire, the new Wacona was like 72 million or something like
Right.
that, and they were like right about a 48% reimbursement, I think is what they're.
Yeah, they're about, I don't know, 80 kids smaller than us.
So, I mean, but if we're looking at what we're 3 to 5 years out, it's building, right,
Yeah.
if we get in, right?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2023.
So, I mean, you gotta add another 10% onto that for the pricing, so you're looking at, over $80 million for a new school plus. I mean, that's, and Greylock is a lot flatter than, Wacona is a lot flatter site than
Yeah.
mine. They have a lot less topographical challenges, geographical challenges. So I think that it could even skyrocket into closer to 100,000 by the time we're ready, and I think that would be the hardest thing. So even though I had the same numbers, I think coming down to the last number, and I think I would probably lean towards a renovation addition. With the caveat that that addition would need to satisfy, as many of the educational goals as possible.
Steve, is it true that if you did the renovation that in addition, just leaving a shell of the school, that it would still likely have a shorter lifespan than the new school? Would there be things that could go wrong?
I think it's just common sense. I mean, you still have 50-year-old structure versus brand new structure.
It depends on what you leave, you know, obviously if they strip out all the plumbing, you're not, in theory, you're not gonna have plumbing problems, whether it's new or renovated. I mean, but they're not gonna, to your point earlier, renovation can mean renovation addition, renovation, but the renovation part of that project can mean a lot of different things. You leave one wall and build everything else new, it's a renovation, you know, it's not a new building.
Fixer upper, they keep finding things they never thought they would find.
Yeah, but my understanding of the first time around was that the renovation addition, when the work was to be done in the existing structure, it was gonna be pretty much a gut job, like everything's coming out, so that you can put your sprinkler system in somewhat efficiently. Obviously, you're gonna be working around some walls that they'll leave, but a lot of the walls were coming down, new walls were going up.
Wasn't the original talk like doing wing by wing so that you could get one part done and kind of move most of the kids? And then
Well, I mean, I think that the thing is you build the STEM addition first, and that becomes the swing space, right? Because that ends up being the equivalent of, what was it, 6 classrooms or something? Or 8, and then then you go hall by hall, opening up one and shutting down one.
And the sprinkler system, which would be inherent to the entire building, they were gonna bring the core down right through the middle of the building, the largest pipes. And then as we shut a wing down, branch into that wing.
Dan, are you done?
Yes.
I didn't want to jump. So, just going back, I had a question that I don't know if we can answer. With the addition / renovation, with the numbers we had, that was $8 million less. Was that what we previously asked for, which is basically like the last go-around? Do you know if that was what John Winokur presented?
I think that's what he was,
So-
those are numbers, I think, from Sharon. I think she was basing everything on
So that's
the
not,
last
because,
project.
correct me if I'm wrong, but our last try did not include any significant improvements to the STEM wing that we're talking about now. And it's my thought that if we invest significantly, STEM is very expensive. I mean, you know, you can't take out any schools. So if we start branching off from this previous proposal to increase the STEM wing, which I think is, you know, imperative, necessary, but I think the cost of an addition or renovation is gonna significantly increase, maybe go past what a new school would be.
Jason, the last round had a brand new STEM wing.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, not STEM, I'm talking, the
CBT.
vocational.
Yeah, yeah.
What was the vocational?
The vocational was not
Was
significant.
not touched, exactly, so I'm sorry,
And that's
too many
a major-
acronyms.
Weren't her numbers based on recent averages and she used square footage and a dollar
Right, so
square
she
foot?
basically took the last proposal and.
I don't think so, only
No.
maybe square feet.
She was pulling
But she
data
was
from
using
the MSBA projects
Yeah.
over
Right.
the last year.
Right, but none of those had the vocational
No.
No, I mean,
aspirations that we
so
did.
the work we've done on vocational ed this past year is really, our thinking about it's really different than it was in the last project, right? So the last project, I think it'd be fair to say we're limping along in terms of our thinking around CBT. And now I think we're just putting a really interesting stake in the ground around what that means and what the pathways are and where the partnerships are. And just, I think, getting ready to look at the impact of space on that, right? So I mean, the obvious example is, we got a new lift say you're living in a box or your own creation, right? But that the auto shop really is a box of our own creation, and we got this great lift, but we can't fully take advantage of it because the ceiling's only so high. And then that's a very simple example, that if we wanna do stuff with applied manufacturing, then there's a battle to come with the wrestling team and the football boosters, and even if they weren't in that space, rather than just saying that, now everybody's gonna freak out, I forgot your lead youth wrestling coach.
Go back to the cafeteria.
I totally stepped in it. Even if nothing was there, that space may not be adequate for what we want to do.
So just going back a little bit, that I kept the thing that, so from Sharon, and they're all based on, current cost per square foot estimates. For addition renovation, she has a range of about, 69.7 million to 96.4 million. And for a new school, she has an estimate of, again, with the most current per square foot estimates, of about 79 million to about 100 million, a little over 100 million.
But that's not the net cost. No, that's the total cost.
Yes, right, yep. Yeah, it's before and second, figure that.
So, who else has something
We go to China here?
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, Molly, you wanna go?
I missed the last two meetings, so I'm a little overwhelmed right now, because I think I'm not understanding this fully. But if we build a new school, have we decided where we put it? You know what I mean, like, is it the parking lot, and that's where it's going, and then we tear this down? Is this money also include the tear down of this school? So I'm missing all these kind of factors, I'm not sure.
Well, and you're missing it, but it's all hypothetical anyway, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you're
but
missing anything.
Okay.
We don't know. I mean, I think that's what the schematic design and some of the other stuff is, right? One possibility is the parking lot, one
Okay.
possibility is directly in front of this building. One possibility is now all the slowly alienating everybody in the community. One possibility is there was a discussion at one point around one of the baseball fields. Right?
Okay, so that
But then this
hasn't
might be
been
the best
decided.
baseball field in the county.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, we don't know.
And does this that we're looking at, the money, does that include the tear down of this if we built the new school?
I think John did say yes, that in the new school that he incorporated, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure John.
No, I thought it included the tear down, but I think it didn't include, or we don't have a sense, and the thing you brought up about the
site work.
site work.
You know, I disagree. I think when we're at the library, he said that would include the site work. He said that there's always variables, but his final number was,
Okay.
he included the site work and included the tear down and removal of the old building,
Yeah,
in that new building cost.
He carried an average site work.
Right,
Yeah,
I mean,
and-
as Dan alluded to, that can escalate quickly. But he did include that.
Good, thank you for correcting.
I mean, so with my base, I go new school. I just feel educational impact, you know, it's a 5 or a 10. We will get what we want and what we're expecting if we build new. When we renovate, you can probably get most or some, but you're definitely not getting everything you want. You have more power with building. Safety, feel the same way with that as well. The cost, I mean, now I'm kind of looking at these numbers a little differently, so I'm not too sure. I mean, I originally put a 4 for new, a 3 for renovation and addition. Now I understand the renovation and addition a little bit more. So I probably put them probably even, tell you the truth. But then with, in the political, I put them both down as 3. I think it's an uphill battle no matter which one I choose. And I think we have to put significant work into, especially like PR and stuff, for either, whatever we decide. So I have 22 for new and 16 for renovation.
I have one thing, just in terms of PR and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. One other reason I'm leaning towards new is because I think the renovation story, I think it is an uphill battle no matter what, and I think that the renovation story is so much more complicated to communicate to people. It involves now a whole discussion of, we're moving this over here so that this can, and people don't wanna follow it and don't wanna listen and won't fully take the time to engage that it requires to really understand all of the changes. So I think we will have people nitpicking at things, whereas selling a new school, I think, is simpler. It boils down to, this doesn't fit the vision we have. It will last longer. For a little more, we can get a new school that's going to last a lot longer and give us everything we want. So I think it will turn into a discussion about cost, but I think it will be, I think there will be fewer things to.
Fewer questions.
Yes.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree.
the biggest fear is
Cost.
cost.
It
Correct.
is,
Absolutely.
but then we won't have people saying, but why can't you, why is the cafeteria moving, and why is, I mean, it gets so, I just remember it with the last couple rounds, it was.
And then also when you deal with students and teachers, if we do build new, they can stay in the school until the new building is completed, and then you can move them into the, like DeConic did, you know, and then tear it down. So I think it's easier on kids and on teachers. Yeah, I mean, that's.
I think it would be a hard sell to parents to say that your kids are gonna be in the building while
Right.
construction
Right.
is going on. I'll have a grandson that would be here at that age, and I would have issues with that.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Doug, what do you think? You're involved in this.
Yeah, I think new's the better choice, but honestly, what I'm hearing from people is if it's cost, then you gotta go renovation. Which I think just contradicted what you said. But, and again, I don't know the political situation, cause I was not here. I have absolutely no idea. But if people keep saying cost, 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 and, I don't wanna in any way misquote you, Steve, but, you know, like some of these things, the safety's gotta be the safety either way, right? Like just some of these things they just have to be that. I don't think we'll get everything we want, but it sounds as if we'll actually get it, if we have a chance to save $20 million.
But then to argue that point,
Maybe
okay.
we should just step outside.
No, 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 what I'm saying is, building new, we're getting 50 years, that's what we're thinking.
Yeah.
When we build new, we're getting 50. Renovation, is there a 50-year guarantee? So is it a 30?
It was more like 30.
Right, so then it's 20 million over 20 years. You see what I'm saying? I don't see how that's the smarter choice.
I can't imagine even if you build a new school that you're not gonna want to renovate parts of it in 30 years.
Well, I agree with that too, but I think, I don't know.
Yeah, you shouldn't wait 50 years to renovate.
I just think in 30 years, the world's gonna look very different,
Yeah.
and no matter what happens, you're gonna wanna make changes to
But
the
that was
school.
the case here, and it just, the can has been kicked and kicked and
Yeah.
kicked.
There's
so
a lot of
here we
different
are.
reasons for that.
But
too.
also
Yeah, and
the-
I agree. I think the fact that in 1994 and 95, we were looking at a major aspect down the road here with two schools. And it came up, I remember Paul and I remember this conversation. We were walking out one day and you said something about, when are we gonna look at the monument? And I said to you, oh my God, let's not think about that now. We're lucky enough to get what we had. We can't bring monument up. And then, of course, the confluence of events that occurred once the project was started here, I think were in my opinion, out of control in regards to the school district. The town of Great Barrington had issues. Again, as I said, Eileen, there's a book to be written here on why the vote. I mean, it is just incredible, the number of factors that all came together on 2 votes within a year. It was incredible. You had selectmen issues. The one that I remember is the person standing up saying, why isn't the school getting rid of that Housatonic school? Damn it, it's sitting there. Where is the school district? And I finally turned and said, we don't own it. No, yes you do, it's there, we're paying it. It was like, there's all this stuff going on. Okay. I'll give you, my view is,
I
I
was
had
gonna say
12 to 13 for renovation and 21 to 23 for, new. And the thing that I had, I'll give you, I'll do the.
Can you say that
the-
again? I'm sorry.
I had 12 to 13 points for renovation addition, and 21 to 23 points for the, new school, model school incentive.
I'm guessing that you and Steve might.
Well, I
have the same
multiplied-
math class.
No, I went, like, for example, educational impact time 2. So I went 4 times 2 is 8.
Oh, good.
Wow. we got some
Okay,
pretty close
so I had
to
8,
the
5, 13, 18, and 23 at the highest. With renovation, some of the things, some of the advantages, cheaper than new. Could be sold as a middle ground between repairing and new. Gives Great Barrington the indication that the Berkshire Hills Regional School District is very aware of costs and the tax burden. Appears to be more realistic than the last project, and with little or no bells and whistles. And again, I use this idea that better form to function. The form to function was very big in my mind. Along with the questions, and this is, I put a star next to it, what about the educational advantages of renovation and addition over new in regards to what's gonna happen to the students and the quality of the program? Because you can't tell me, as I said to Dan the other day, I remember teaching outside in the rooms when Peter Carlotta would drive by with a mower. And he's usually in the middle of a movie, it was usually in the middle of a student presentation, and suddenly we stop. Why? Because the mower is going back and forth for 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, from a teaching standpoint, fold up the cards for the day, because you ain't gonna get anything done. I'm sorry, I wasn't observed by a principal or anything when all this happened. I probably would have said the same thing. I would have said, well, that's it, because you don't get the kids back. And I cannot.
You watch too many movies.
That's right, that's right. I think.
The principal or Pete?
Maybe that's why Pete was driving by.
Right,
That's why he
yeah,
watched it.
yeah. I really think that, and the effect on teaching. And I did read that the superintendent of the Central Berkshire District said that was a key element in their decision. What's gonna happen to the quality of the program that's being delivered currently, and how do we handle the kids? I cannot imagine that in this building, if we just build here, we're not gonna be affected by what's going on in the A wing. I don't know how you're gonna do it. You're gonna build a wall, excuse me. You're gonna build a protective, soundproof barrier and envelop the building that's being worked on while we're running a program here. As I said earlier in the thing, Westfield High School addressed the program by going on double schedule. You know, maybe that's one way. You have a few kids here in the, you go from 7 to 12 for freshmen and sophomores, and you go from 12:30 to 4:30 for seniors and juniors that love that. But Westfield High School, actually, when they built the new one, that's what they did. They went on a double schedule, okay? So that was really a key to me in regards to renovation and looking at what this building is. And I have some attachment to this building, as Paul knows. 40 years, you spend your professional life here. I will agree with what Rebecca said. I was at forums in which one of the big issues was, my God, you're getting rid of the cafeteria. Oh, I went to school there. I don't, Michelle, right? I mean, you ate lunch here, for how many years? Okay. I had people at the forum saying that was a big thing. They're gonna change it. Oh, they're gonna move the cafeteria somewhere else. Why?
I hated the cafeteria when I was here,
So-
I'm good with moving it.
Same food though.
Yeah. So I have, it appeared to me that this is, the renovation definitely is more realistic, less bells and whistles. And Roger just mentioned something, and it uses the current building. And I think, that gives another issue to people, oh, what are you gonna do with the building? That is another aspect. The political thing, I agree with everybody. I had 3 on both ones. It's gonna be a hell of a battle no matter what. Okay, I think we have a better chance with a new, using the model school incentive. And that's why I think we have to really look at that. I think that is a selling point, that we're saving money. Now, I have a question because of my own ignorance. Steve and Peter, if this new project, we pay for the architects and everything and all the feasibility work, right? Because we blew it last time. We got reimbursed last time, correct?
That's correct.
We got, it was $750,000, I believe.
Right, so.
And that's money that-
And to be clear with everybody on this, this is a known thing, right? So
Yeah.
the MSBA gives you money to do different parts of this project, because we got through the first part and we did the schematic design, they paid for that already. They're not gonna pay for that again, so the first $750, maybe $1 million is on us as we go forward. If the model project exists again, the cost of that schematic design could potentially be less if it exists.
I had for new school, I had 4 on the educational impact. Not totally 5. I think there are some areas of the building that would not be affected as much. Certainly would have a substantial impact on CVTE, which is one of my big things that I think we really have to, it's a different idea than existed well before. It is the way to go. I know STEM is big, but I think STEM is starting to, I think people have heard enough about STEM. I think people want to do what Chris Danillo said. They want kids to come out of this school able to get a living and able to live here in this community and be contributing members. And I see that much more positively with a new school. And I also mentioned, and I put in my notes, we're a comprehensive high school. Everybody else that you're reading about, Wacona's not comprehensive. Mount Everett's not comprehensive. Taconic is. McCann is. But every other school, except us, is an academic high school. So we're a comprehensive high school, and you have to keep that in mind.
Well, McCann's really a
technical school,
that
right,
does
yeah.
some academic stuff on
I had 5 for the safety, because there's no way, and I don't see how, I think when we look at renovation addition, we're gonna have to make some compromises even in regards to that, because of the costs that are involved. I'd rather see us go all hog in the safety, because that's another selling point. I thought that we would take advantage of most or all the incentives. And then I had 3 being a very close vote. And so my total came to 21 and 23. The advantages to me of a new school, it gives the Berkshire Hills vision for a high school. It's a perfect vehicle for the implementation of CVTE, labs, tech, classroom structure. A disadvantage, it may not effectively really affect English, social studies. I mean, being a social studies teacher, being in a nice new classroom would be great, having lights and everything, and having windows. I don't think it, but for CVTE, you gotta have it. Complete updates to all safety and security issues are addressed in a new. There's no compromises. I think the higher cost with Great Barrington is the idea that it's gonna be a sell. More attractive to gain another town, that a new building, a new model school will be able to make us more attractable to bring a town in or to bring another district in. Except that the district that I'd like to go in doesn't seem to want to dance with us. New may mean more of the same hype as seen in the last project. That's a disadvantage. We would be more an advantage, another would be more likely to have choice kids come in. Because up to a point, Mr. Gibbons and I will disagree with this, but up to a point, choice is a moneymaker. Okay? You're gonna have standard building costs. Choice helps revenue. Being on the budget committee, for the school committee, I've seen that. When we cut down on choice, suddenly our revenue dropped.
That was a bad experiment.
The MSBA is a question mark as to incentives as a disadvantage. How much, we don't know. There's a question about geothermal, okay? With a new school, we get more bang for the buck. We'll have to, as a disadvantage, we'll have to answer the student enrollment decline issue. That's come up in Wacona. I saw that in many of the people who voted against it. What about that? We have to address that. We are losing people. But as a joiner, if we build new, what we may lose in a population, we may get with more choice students. Okay? Under a new, there'd be no need to disrupt the current high school educational process as to both teachers and students. We wouldn't have to worry about trailers, we wouldn't have to, that's taken care of. And as Molly said, it's a transition from old to new. And then we would have better science and tech classrooms. More group work could be allowed. As Diana said, it would be more open. I see that as better form to function, and that's why I gave more points to new. But as I'm listening tonight, I really think the model school incentive is where I would like to see us go, because then we're dealing with something that we have already gotten, and we can look at and tweak, not that it's gonna be a carbon copy. So that's where I'm, okay?
I've got a couple questions for you.
Yep.
In your renovation, what did you score cost?
Cost was 3.
So-
I have John Whitaker said, and he differed with Sharon, because he said Sharon's very conservative. His thing for new was, he thought about 47 million. This includes, you know, if we get MSBA, I believe, that's what he said. 47 million was John's estimate with a 50-year estimated life
For new.
Yeah.
for new.
Yes.
After incentives.
After incentives. He also said it would probably include about 25% of ineligible costs. And then I had, okay, I'm just gonna find it. Dan, you had it.
But the only question I have is for MSBA reimbursements, you get up to 5 points for renovation reuse.
Right.
So you don't get that in new, so I'm not quite sure how you
But you
say
might.
that you get more incentives for new. You get a lot less, if you're talking MSBA. You can score it however you want.
No, I didn't think, you're right, you're right. I had 47 million, John estimate for new, and 40 million for renovation, plus or minus 15%, and that was his estimate.
I was looking at my notes over today too, and I saw the exact same figures.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
47 and 40.
And I felt for the difference, you get so much more form to function with the new.
But again, that's what I was trying to say all along, it could be a $20 million difference, that's.
Okay, right. Okay. Any,
So, and I just
yeah,
wanna add something
yeah.
in, and you talk about impact to teachers and students. There still is an impact in a new school.
Mhm.
And my girlfriend, who's an art teacher at Taconic, could tell you this for sure. When she had to pack up her art room at the end of last year, and it took her half a year to figure out where everything was, and so there is an impact.
Right, right.
And in a new school, despite best efforts, things don't always work right.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
took her,
I
I mean, her kiln doesn't, I mean, the timer doesn't work out.
Right.
Which is a problem for a powder kiln. So, you know, so there is bugs, so you can't say everything's gonna be perfect when we're
Right.
talking.
Yeah, I
So
see.
there is always an impact. Anyway.
Okay.
So, did you have your say?
Yep. Paul has them.
Paul hasn't, I haven't, made an occasional joke, but I haven't said much about my thoughts. So maybe Paul, you go, and then I go. Steve too, maybe Steve Bannon at some point.
Okay.
First of all, I didn't use any of this stuff. I didn't do it when I was teaching, and I wasn't gonna start now doing it. When you teach science, the answer's right or it's wrong. Nothing in between.
That's why I have the
That's not
social studies.
exactly true.
That's why I have
Anyway,
social studies.
I don't think first of all, I think one of the keys to this, or would have been one of the keys to this, is expanding our regional school district with the South. I don't understand their thinking down there, but I guess it's a dead deal. I have my own opinions about the people that are running that district, but I'll keep those to myself. No matter what we do, if I look at the last line here, some of you have rated 3, 4, whatever. No matter what it is, I believe the chance of it passing is small, no matter what we do. And the key to it is selling. And I don't mean to throw people under the bus from the last one, but the last one was not sold properly. It wasn't sold, period. And I think that was the biggest mistake. We had all this argument about this project, and we didn't tell everybody the right thing. I voted against it twice because it wasn't sold properly. And I think that's the key to this. No matter what we do, the numbers that they have at Wacona are probably more accurate for what it will cost here than the numbers that have been thrown around here, because they're doing something now, and we're just guessing at some and adding an inflation factor and all that kind of stuff. Those numbers are scary. No matter what you choose, those numbers are scary. I do not believe, and I don't want to hear about this, and I kept reading about it, and I will never use the term again except right now. I don't want to hear about the 21st century model of education. I don't know what it is, and I don't know how you can predict what things are going to be like in 10 years, let alone 50 years. So I wouldn't even worry about that, but I do not believe that we can deliver the education that I've heard from the teachers in this footprint. Now, I might be persuaded if we're gonna add in addition, but I wasn't considering that when I heard renovation. So I'm a little bit biased towards the newer school than that hybrid. I call it a hybrid. So I really believe that it comes down to what kind of an education do we want to deliver to our students? And I do not believe that we can deliver the kind of education that everybody's talking about now in this footprint, no matter what we do to this building. I've been thinking over the past few days about what would I have done differently now if I were designing the area that I spent 40 years in. And I certainly would have done it a lot differently, knowing what I know now, than, because we helped design that. The teachers, when we built this building, we had a say, at least the science people did, had a say in what that science wing would look like, which is another mistake that we made before, but we didn't make it when we had those teachers in to listen to them. Just the key going down and looking at the auto shop and listening to Chris tell us about the lift that he brand new, but he can't use it to its full extent anyway, because the ceilings aren't high enough. So we're gonna raise the ceilings and all that kind of stuff. Hey, it's time, sometimes it's okay to say the building has outlived its usefulness. We don't have to give all the educational jargon and all that kind of stuff. The building has outlived its usefulness, and it's time to move on to something new. I'm not worried about where it can go, because there were plans to put a building 2 stories high down on the new baseball field. I don't think it ever got voted on. I don't think it was ever, yeah, but it was a plan to go down there, because I know we were involved with trying to, well, where are we gonna put all the new athletic fields, and trying to figure out where that was gonna happen. It never came to fruition, so it's, but there's places to put it. We're gonna tear this down? Yep, we're gonna tear it down. It's gone. Is it a cost? Yep, it's a cost. So no matter what we do, the cost is gonna be high, and it's gonna be scary to people. And that's why I think it has a small chance of passing, but it has a chance of passing. And it's just gonna depend upon people selling it. That's the key. No matter what we finally recommend to the school committee, and no matter what they finally decide to do, it's going to take a hard sell. So I didn't give 21 out of 22 points, or 0 out of this, or whatever. That's what I felt. I haven't changed my mind since the early part of all these meetings. And I've heard a lot of stuff here, some of which I agree with, some of which I think is BS, but it's my own personal opinion. So that's where I go. So if you want me to give numbers to it, I'll go back and I'll figure out some numbers here. But I'm working backwards. I'm not gonna work from, okay, this one is worth a 3, and someone else is worth a 4. It's all subjective anyway. So what difference does it make?
I thought science is an exact thing.
Maybe you should be in the philosophy. Okay, who do we got left?
Steve, are you weighing in?
I will give some opinions, but I will hold it for my final opinion, because the school committee is gonna make the final decision, so I'm not gonna, I haven't totally decided, but there were some things that were said tonight that were really, really interesting. One, don't discount the iconicness of this building to some people, and they didn't rip down Wrigley Field, they didn't rip down Fenway Park. Some people feel that way about this building, and it did affect how people would vote. So don't completely discount that. The other thing is, don't discount the cost. It may be a very small chance to pass, but depending on the cost, and our costs here are so much estimates, as Paul said, you really can't put a whole lot of weight into it. But $10 million could sway one way or another. That's a lot of money. And the difference already between the last two projects and this one, at least on paper, and that's all we are right now, is so tremendous that another 10% or 15% may be the difference between a chance of passing or not. So I haven't made up my mind yet. The model school is interesting. I don't know. The last time, I don't have the understanding of remodeling, but when I saw what they were doing with this building last time, you can do a heck of a lot with remodeling. It's not that you're just gonna paint some walls and put a new floor in. They were pretty impressive. Did they go too far last time? Yeah, we went too far last time. But that doesn't mean we didn't learn something from it, maybe just a little bit. So, we'll see. I'm not gonna give my opinion. I haven't quite formed it yet, and I think it's only fair if the school committee, not members on this committee, but members who aren't on this committee should wait and hear your presentation and make their own decision at that time.
Steve? Chime in?
Sure. I think, just as an aside, I think it's pretty funny that we have 80 years of teaching experience on that end of the table, and one of them is assuming something that's not in reality, and the other one threw out the whole model. Sadly, I was taught by both of them.
It's encouraging. My subject wasn't as exact as Mr. Newman's was.
That will not be recorded.
We won't hold that.
I can also tell you what 40 years of teaching does to your skills.
I've changed my mind on this 100 different times since these meetings started. And just going off the rubric, following instructions, Paul, I think that the first two categories are a wash, whether we go new or renovate addition. And I put 5s for both. I think it's probably unrealistic to put 5s, but I think regardless of if we build a new building or if we renovate and add on, I think the renovation part, the scope of the renovation will be so grand that we will be able to secure this building and make it safe, and we will get the educational spaces that we want and need. I think that the political feasibility, like everybody else has said, is pretty much, it's an uphill battle, and it's a sales, it's a sales pitch. To Paul's point, maybe we didn't do a good enough sales pitch the first time around. Point is that regardless of what the project is, it needs to have a good sales pitch. So I guess I'm having a little trouble differentiating the two until you get to cost, and the cost is, the way that the rubric reads, the way I read it was to look at the MSBA reimbursement and then Sharon and John's numbers, and the renovation and addition in both Sharon and John's numbers was the less expensive way to go versus new. And in the currently existing reimbursement from the MSBA, the only one that would differ, in my opinion, is the second to last one, the renovation reuse of existing facilities up to 5 points. Everything else is gonna be, we probably get the same for new or renovation addition. you know, the newly formed regional school district, if that happens, we're gonna get X amount of points whether we build new or renovate. I think the highly efficient green school program, whatever it is we do in a new building, I would like to think that the building committee and community would wanna see in a renovated addition option. The best practices for routine maintenance is gonna be, that definitely will be the same, whether we go new or renovate, add, and the overlay zoning and establishing a maintenance trust probably isn't gonna happen either way. So the only different one is as far as I can interpret it, is the renovation reuse. And I do think the bottom line is when people go to vote, sadly, or maybe not sadly, I mean, in a lot of cases it is the determining factor, how much it's gonna cost them. And their incomes, whether they're fixed incomes or, you know, variable incomes, what everybody pays in taxes definitely is going to strongly affect the way they vote. Now, having said all that, if the new model or the model school comes back on the table, then I would most certainly get behind that and wanna explore more and see, is that up to 5 points, is it up to 8 points, is it up to 2 points? You know, I think that the financial analysis, which is, as we all agree, is pretty hypothetical at this point, is a very large factor in what will or will not be approved. So based on everything that we have right now, I think the renovation addition is least expensive and therefore more likely to get approved. And I think most of the other categories are a wash.
Maybe I'll chime in a little bit. I've been thinking about both of this, and I did the rubric, and I'm leaning towards the new school, ideally the model project, if it happens, and to say all the reasons would just be redundant at this point. The thing though that I think is worth sharing are some of the stuff that's happened since the failed vote, because it's definitely a tough sell, but I look back on the few years since the last time it didn't go through, and as I'm sending a letter to the MSBA and all this other stuff, we do have a revised regional agreement with a new split for funding capital projects, right? And that's a pretty big deal. We're getting ready, and the timing may be right on this, to retire the existing debt in the elementary and the middle school. So if we do this, if sort of everything works on this potential timeline that we're on, and the debt and those buildings get retired, the cost of this, swapping that out, may not be, I think it's a heavy lift, but it may not be impossible. I spent the last 3 years working here and also in the Shaker Mountain district, and there are possibilities that something might have been interesting with Richmond. And there's a timeline to make decisions about that, with sort of figuring out what's gonna happen with the whole Shaker Mountain Union, and then what's gonna happen with us and Richmond, and that's all teed up to happen by December of this year, right before we hear back from the MSBA. So that's interesting. I share, I don't remember which one you were saying about this. Maybe Paul was talking about Southern Berkshire. I share the frustration with that. The other couple things that I think are neat is we didn't do a good job selling it the first time, but also think we didn't do a good job articulating a compelling educational vision. And we don't need to call it a 21st century vision, right? It's just, what is this space gonna let us do differently than we're able to do now? And I don't think we did a good job of doing that. And I think we're in a much better position to do that now, particularly as related to the CBTE stuff. And I think that'll potentially bring in a whole different level of conversations, the other two things that came up is, how can we look at whether we do a renovation and addition or a new building or a model thing within the new building, how can we look at building the space in a way or renovating in a way that lets it be more friendly for community use? So people don't realize how much the community's in here, but I think there are even more opportunities to do that. And I think if people saw that, that would be an added benefit or bonus. It's interesting, you come up here at 7 in the morning, and there are 20 people walking, like doing laps on the track, and you come here in the summer, and there's the whole Berkshire Hills Tennis Association, and it's the Muslims and Country Club. How many people are doing that, and you see people here for the musicals and town meeting and some of those things, but I think there are more opportunities there. And then I think the last one that's gonna be expensive but is worth finally addressing is the thing Rebecca talked about, which is the driveway entrance exit thing. It's, every time I drive in and out of there, I'm anxious about it. Right? And I'm 53 and not the best driver, but an okay driver. But I don't like that my 17-year-old son, who's a beginning driver, is dealing with that. Right? So that's why. So I lean slightly towards the new school with the hope of the model project, but I think to me the common thread on all of this is whether we go with one or the other, or it'll be interesting to do a show of hands or something, or a split recommendation. The common theme in all of this is, in either one we're getting a lot of what we want, and in either one we're going to have to do a remarkable job of making a compelling argument. So, co-chairs, where do we go from here?
Well, I've been thinking, as I've listened to everybody, I could be happy supporting either one. And from what I've heard, and Dan, your point to me has, I never put that in. It didn't really change my total, but that's using an existing building obviously makes it, to me, politically more feasible. But then there are issues around that, and the one that Rebecca has mentioned is the driveway. And that is not gonna be covered by MSBA. And from what you said with the costs of gravel and construction and everything, that's gonna be a tremendous aspect. I hate to be wishy-washy, because I'm never that way. I could support both. I would obviously be much more likely and more enthusiastic to support a new. But again, new is, and I don't, this model school, I don't wanna be, let's not raise our hopes here, because it could be, that could be something that's, we're talking about, we all get on the bandwagon, and then they say, no, we're not gonna do that, we're not gonna consider it. But from what Pat said to me, John Whitaker, if we could push him to find out and get in and say, we've got a school district that really wants to use this model program. And it seems from tonight's discussion, and I'm getting, it seems to be that we could do a model school with many of the things that have been said about renovation. And it kind of changes what, quote, new means. And I think that came right out at the beginning. New does not have to be what was presented in the past. Both of these, to me, are complete divergent from what was presented in the past. And we can, again, I know, being a history person, history has determined quite a lot what we do now. That vote, but people have changed. We talked about the changing demographics in Great Barrington, the changing economy. I think the vision, I'll repeat what Peter said and why I thought it was so important that we spend some time on that. I think the vision of the school district, through the leaderships of Peter and Steve as school committee chairman, moving, and the support of the school committee, toward a CVTE is really important. And I see that as being done in both. Do I see it better in a new model? Yes, I do. But I could live with supporting as enthusiastically a renovation addition that would certainly be able to include the CVTE, and that's where I agree with Dan. The educational advantages to me have to look at, if they're almost similar, then obviously we get down to cost. So, that's where I stand. I don't know how we wanna work this as a recommendation. Do we wanna?
Well,
I don't
Peter
know.
talked about bringing us to a consensus.
Mhm.
I wasn't keeping score, was anybody keeping
I,
score?
I kept score. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for renovation. Not renovation addition. Okay, am I correct on that? I have Roger, Diane, Josh, Dan, and Steve. Jim, Rebecca, Carl, Jason, Molly, Bill, and Paul. Did I leave anybody out?
Renovation.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6.
But there are more people in the room than that.
Yeah, well, who are voting members here? We're all,
What was the final, 7-6?
yeah, that's what I have. I have Roger.
Are you counting me or are you
Oh.
not counting?
You didn't call?
Yeah,
Did you call him?
who, Peter?
Yeah.
What about Carl?
Might
Carl's
people's
name was-
minds have been changed.
I did Jim, Rebecca, Carl, Bradford, Peter, Jason, Molly, Bill, and Paul.
There's 13 at the table plus Carl, so there's 14 total.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So I have,
Can't be 7-6 then.
so Roger, Diane.
He's a social studies teacher.
I know, right,
Come
yeah.
on, Paul, help him
I don't
out.
deal with the exact.
Yeah, between.
Oh, yeah, it's somewhere close, come on. 1945, 1946, come on, who cares? It's, it's close. It's in the
Can I
20th century.
add one comment?
Sure.
We talk a lot about cost and it coming down to cost, obviously, Steve Bannon had mentioned, even a $10 million difference might do it. I think the price of a renovation or the new school is going to make people's heads explode. No one is going to look at the number like we are and say, oh, the renovation, that must be less than what the new one was, that seems very reasonable. Everyone's gonna be surprised by it. I totally agree with what Paul was saying in terms of selling it. And I go back to what I said before, which is it's a much simpler story to tell, as Paul said so succinctly. This has outlived its life. I think coupled with what you were saying, Bill, in terms of, and Peter, obviously, about the vision, especially for CVTE, we're building a new school. I think that that's a much simpler story to tell, and I think people will get excited about it. I think one thing that was a problem last time that I think we need to do better at this time is just getting people excited to vote yes. And I think there were people that just didn't go out of their way to vote yes, that were supportive of it. And I think that a new school would get people excited. And hearing about CVTE, I think we need enthusiasm, and I don't think we wanna get bogged down in justifying every little switching this and there, and I mentioned that before, but I think the simpler the story, the better.
We're making a recommendation to the school
Correct.
committee, correct?
I'm just getting a little concerned because of, I hear what everybody is saying. The one major disagreement I have was on the renovation addition. As far as political feasibility, I think most people scored a 3. If I was sitting at the table, I would score a 4, which is unusual for me. But it's just what I am hearing. People here, already I'm hearing, well, they want that new school. Okay, I heard it today, a voter stopped at the house today. And just because an argument is simple, I think you would tell students, just because something's simple doesn't mean that's the right way to go. We tell our daughter that all the time. What you want is to move forward and do it in the best way possible. And as far as I'm concerned, I think there is an excellent chance for the renovation addition. I think it's excellent. You could, what people would probably get excited about is the model school, but because that's uncertain, for tonight, you know, I'm looking at what's going on. It would be great, you know, after tonight to really dig in and, you know, look more into whether that's a possibility. But I have to be honest with you, people do get excited about eating and paying their bills. And that's what it boils down to in Great Barrington. And I'm in precinct B, and that's a different beast.
I think the school is such an important, I mean, the school feeds a lot of people, and it is the,
It does.
you know, and I guess I'm just so focused on the CBT
And I just went
aspects
through
of it.
number one
Yeah.
and number two. I was entrenched in the no voters in number two, and that is beginning to rise to the surface again. People know what's going on here, okay? Meaning the work, what the conversation is. So they know people taxes are going up again in Great Barrington, although I think there was great control over both the school budget and the town budget this year, but they're going up, and they're not going to go down in Great Barrington. You know, we're talking about in Great Barrington, we need more affordable housing. Well, excuse me, aren't these the same people that have to pay, pay taxes and the costs in Great Barrington too? So if they're living in affordable housing and they're looking at this huge price tag, that's another thing. But, like I said, the big difference in conversation is I would have given a renovation addition a chance of passing of a 4. With taking into consideration what Peter said about retiring debt and that sort of thing. Also the CBTE program, because people really want that. They really want that. And that speaks to the older generation. For example, if my dad was still alive, he was a bricklayer. And if he heard, listen, up in Monument Mountain, they're gonna be training some kids to be masons. We need somebody to plaster our house. My dad's dead. He was the one who did all the plastering. We can't find anybody who can do a great plaster job. But if my father heard, you know, up in Monument Mountain, what they're doing now, they're teaching kids how to plaster, or they're teaching kids to do electrical and everything. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea, and I think you win. But I agree with what's been said. It's gonna be hard to sell it one way or the other. What I'm looking for is outcome, and I think the most positive outcome from the conversations I have been with the renovation and addition. I do, and
Can I chime in a little on the
Sure,
process?
yeah.
So we're sort of split, right? Like
Yeah,
8-6, it's not 7-7, but
No.
it's pretty close to 7-7,
Yeah.
right? We're split. We have a couple choices, right? We could talk around this to see if we can get the 6s over to the 8s, or the 8s over to the 6s, right? And we could do that for a while. And if we can't resolve that tonight, we could do it another time. We could structure a recommendation that celebrates the shared things in either possibility, and though this will drive the school committee a little crazy, that says the final decision can only be made in the context of the MSBA process when the details and the numbers get really specific. That's frustrating because we spent a year trying to get to a concise, clear recommendation, and we may not be able to do it. So,
But hey, Peter, I don't think it's that frustrating for people who've been in the room, because this is genuinely how everyone feels. It's
Right.
it's not like it was a 7-2 vote or 9-3, and we said, no, we're gonna still do a split recommendation. And this brings the picture of what the school committee has to grapple with when we make our decision.
Yeah, well, that's what we get
Yeah,
elected to
so
do.
I think this is just a microcosm of what we're gonna deal with.
Can I just chime in? Many meetings ago, I and Paul said, nope, we don't wanna be wishy-washy, we wanna go with a recommendation. I personally would feel that we could present to them what we presented tonight here's what we saw good about the renovation, addition. Here's what we saw good about the new. Could we come to a decision? No, not really. 8-6, I wouldn't call an overwhelming consensus. And I don't like this, you know, forget that, okay? I don't like that. I don't work that way. I'm a consensus person. I like working with people. I like to iron out conflict, okay? That's just the way I am. I would be happy going before the school committee with exactly what we've done here tonight.
I have a question regarding the school committee. Have they, and I'm looking at you, Steve, just, but has the school committee said they're going to do something?
Yeah. Well, we will vote on the statement of interest Thursday evening, but we've already said we're going to have it submitted.
Right,
Yes.
and all that is a placeholder to getting Q to do something.
Right.
The other one is like 6 boxes in the first
Correct.
check.
But the answer is yes.
So, all right, so, so.
Doing nothing is not an option here,
Right.
we all know that.
Yeah, we're gonna
sitting in
submit
the
something.
reason.
Right.
And I think that, you know, it's funny, you think of the Central Berkshire vote, if anybody saw the picture, it to me encapsulated what we're doing here tonight. You had 3 people holding yes signs, and you had 3 people holding no signs. But what I noticed was the ages. You had 3 older people, no. You had 3 younger people, most likely parents of kids in the district, yes. And I just said to my wife, I said, wow, there it is, there's the issue right there. You have people who are feeling a fiscal, as Michelle has said, a fiscal burden. You have, on the other hand, people who are willing to take that fiscal burden because it deals with their children and the future. So I have no problem as a co-chair of going before the school committee and saying, this is what we came to conclude. We couldn't come to a recommendation. Here's what we saw good and negative about each one. And then, as Steve has said, and I've always believed it too, we're elected to make decisions. And that's what we should be doing, and say to the school board, because I think that kind of the debate that we've had here, the opinions, the sharing, I think will go on at that level too, and I wouldn't dare say how it's gonna come out. So, I would be happy in doing that. I don't know, how about the rest of you? How do you feel about that?
I think it's okay. I personally, like what you said at the very first meeting, that we needed to make a, decision one or the other. I think if we propose to say, yes, we recommend by a slight margin a new building, but the discussion has shown that I think all of us can be swayed one way or the other, and that they're the ones that are gonna make the final decision. And I think we would all be happy, it sounds like, with either way at this point. But that's their decision to make. But I think we need to make, personally, I feel we need to make a yes or no, one way, but that's just my personal opinion.
Russ?
I could, again, be swayed the other way, but, we're all Republicans and Democrats, and we work together, right?
Yeah.
But just to throw in,
Yeah.
I really couldn't be persuaded to go new unless there's a lot more information.
I said most.
So,
Kim?
so I'm gonna go to the college fair.
Okay.
So I have to leave. I would be persuaded to go new if the model program, but it doesn't exist, so it's
Right.
really difficult to vote for something that doesn't exist. But in a year, when it potentially could, and if that cost is close, then of course go new.
Well, how would that, is that worth asking if the model, I know this gets very hypothetical, but if that were, we would support that, since it's not, we're split? I mean, is that
I think we'd basically be saying that by sharing the conversations that we've had and sort of giving weight to both sides and saying what the advantages and disadvantages are, being very transparent about the arguments that people have had, saying, one of the big downsides of doing renovations is the displacement of students and teachers. One of the big downsides of doing a new school is the potentially larger cost and unclear about how much cost that's gonna be. And so we think that this decision can only be made with more information. I don't think that's a wavery.
Is that a report the committee's gonna be happy with?
Yeah, I think half the committee's here anyway, but yes. And probably now's the time to say, whenever you give your report, I'd like every one of you to be there, because I think it's important to show that, I mean, you were at almost every meeting, you should be at this.
Is the people that were for the renovation addition leaning that way anyway? And I'm not looking for you to answer this, it's sort of a rhetorical question. Is the thought of the possibility of this model school something that would be so persuasive that you would change your mind?
My worry about the model school program is that
Well, the reason let me just
Yeah, yeah.
finish. The reason I'm saying that is that if we're going to give some kind of a report and a recommendation, that should be part of what we would present. That there is a possibility of this model that might be persuasive enough to shift the consensus to a more overwhelming majority or something like that. I mean, each one of you has to figure that out.
You have a question?
Could I ask
Yeah.
two questions? I missed that meeting because I was ill. Is the model school, is there a model school design that would be pretty much appropriate for this high school on this general site? Or would there have to be major changes to the design to make it appropriate and maybe to downsize it? And do you have any idea what those costs would be?
that was gonna be my worry about the model school program, is that we might go down that road and find out that to have a full vocational program, especially automotive, like it's very important to Monument, that might be an additional, heavy cost, given that many other schools with model school programs don't focus on automotive.
Which would make the cost between the model school and a freshly designed school perhaps negligible.
This is just sort of speculative, but the model schools I looked at reminded me of when I was a kid and I had gerbils, and those habit trail things that are all connected. So there's like a base part of it, and then there are places on the ends where you can do slightly different things. So I think there's some flexibility.
I once looked into a program similar to that, and the costs to change it were
Prohibitive?
astronomical.
Yeah.
No, this was not a school, but it was something else.
May I say something?
Let's
go. Sorry. No.
My thought would be, to go along with the wishy-washy thought, if we could, right, to phrase
Spelled in
this.
the middle name.
Yeah, something, right, would be to phrase this in a way that, this committee would recommend a project moving forward that would best enhance the educational programs, specifically the CVTEA programs, while identifying and solving as many of the safety concerns as we can, while being respectful to the costs. I mean, that could be wordsmithed any way you want, but does that sound something like kind of what we're saying here?
I think that the difference between this vote and the vote last time, I can't remember which way I voted, because I couldn't figure out where anybody was coming from and what the reason was for renovating the school. But I think the difference is the CVTE program. And however we can best, if a model school doesn't include the CVTE program, that I think exactly what you're saying, the vision needs to include that as a very major concern in whichever way we decide. And it has to serve that the best way it can, because I think this community will be built on that CVTE program, and the younger people will stay around for this. Kids will be trained at this school to go work in this community, and I think that to me, is the difference between this vote and any other vote that came before.
I was gonna say.
And you don't have to sell that, because that's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, so two things I'm wondering, right, do we wanna start with what your recommendation as a draft motion, right? That, and maybe even vote on it, right? Then send some combination of, it could be anybody, but I'm looking to these two guys, so Steve and Joshua and I, to go through the notes, to have people give me written comments if they have them on the sheets, to try to articulate it in a coherent way, and then we bring it back to the group to see, does this represent the tenor of our conversation and work? And then that's just a straw man that we pick apart, right? So I think there's agreement around a lot of things. The final outcome, there's not agreement. There's interest in some funny stuff in the middle, like this model school thing, if it could happen. I think we commit that to paper in some way, and then bring that back to this group as the beginnings of a presentation, and we narrow down our thinking a little more.
Well, my comment was, I thought Dan was, you have the makings of a motion. What you just said, I thought you were gonna say, I make a motion, because what
Okay,
you were.
I make a motion.
Okay. Because
Want me to read back
I'm
what I
nodding.
said?
Yeah, he's got it.
Yeah, so I think what Dan said was, recommend a project moving forward that would best enhance the educational programs, particularly CVTE, while identifying as many safety concerns as we can while being respectful to cost.
Yes.
We need a second.
Second.
We have a motion? We have a second. We've had a lot of discussion, but.
What did that say?
Yeah.
I
don't know. That was
Sounded
I think what it says is it's
We could
taking-
make a decision.
Exactly.
Right, but there's reasons now that I didn't feel were existing months ago of why that's the case. And yes, we didn't come to a final decision.
But that's what
because
we were asked to do.
We were.
Yeah, but then you guys don't follow rules anyway.
You know, if you move this ahead a couple of years, this is, you want us to sell this to the voters. It's not that easy, because it's not that clean. It's, hopefully, as this moves along, some of the hypotheticals that Rebecca talked about will be reality. We'll know, is there a model school program? What are the actual costs, or at least closer to the actual? What, you know, I've gone to, I think, almost every one of your meetings. I've missed a couple. It's almost, you were put in an almost impossible position because there's so many hypotheticals. But you've fleshed out enough detail to give the school committee some edge to understand what the problems are and what the solutions are. So I don't see this as a loss.
No.
I see this as, I think we've come a long way, but there's just not enough concrete information to make that final decision.
Well, and that's part of why the MSBA, assuming we get in, makes us spend a whole year doing this in even more detail with people even more professional than Steve and I, who are designers and architects, to go a level deeper.
Right, and oh, by the way, a little bit with tongue in cheek, doesn't really matter what we think if they don't agree with us. We have to convince them. They're a good group. There's negotiations.
No,
But if we really are off track, they'll tell us.
But I think there are two things, right? There's convincing the MSBA, and then being really aggressive in who we hire as our designers, and this time driving home what our goals are, which I think we've articulated very clearly, but particularly around, we have to come up with the very interesting design that's the most reasonable, efficient use of resources they've ever done, right? Which is different than like what the other people did, which they gave us the super interesting, beautiful design that wasn't a particularly good use of resources.
And I would say this, if I learned anything from the last 2 times, which apparently I didn't because it went 2 times,
Yeah.
is that picking out the designer at the beginning, as well-intentioned as the designers we picked out was probably the start of our road down to failure.
Totally was.
Yeah.
Right? I want to hire like the cinder block kings, not the fancy architects.
Right, If they mentioned marbles during the interview,
Right.
please, someone throw them out of the room.
It would seem that the one thing that, if not all of us, the majority of us agree on, is that we want this, whatever finally is the result, is to have CVTE a major part of it. Is that correct?
That's what I'm trying to say
Yeah,
in my motion.
so
Yeah.
then, I think that, from my point of view, we would present something that incorporates that as an agreement, that the majority of the people exist, that the majority of people support that. Whatever housing it goes into, we were unable to come to a majority consensus.
Well, the other thing, and we may not be able to do it now, and some of us are losing focus, because we could for about 2 hours before we struggle. But maybe we go back through the notes I read, and we really call out all the points of overlap, right? And craft even a more sophisticated motion that references, right? So even though we had a split vote 8-6, there are probably 20 things that people individually said that everybody in the room agrees upon. And I can't rattle them all off right now, but some of them. But if we go back through the notes and what we wrote, maybe we start the beginning of our next meeting after having analyzed this and the stuff people have, with a draft of that, and see if we can get on the same page in those things, and then write a motion that addresses that, and then move forward from there. Right, I like Dan's motion, but we.
Well, we have a motion on the floor in a second, so.
Well, it could just be, what's the parliamentary thing?
If Josh withdraws the
Yeah, I
second.
would
Second,
withdraw.
okay.
Then I'll withdraw the
Okay.
motion. We're done.
I like that, yeah.
Lay over.
Yeah,
Is
just
that-
table it, that's all.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. right.
Is that, are we happy with that? I mean, happy in the sense that, yes, I can say, it's a good point.
So what I'll do is, anything you have, if you're comfortable giving me your sheets, give me your sheets. If you put your name on it, I promise I'll return them.
I won't have to put my name on it because you can see my handwriting.
No, but it looks a lot like Steve's. Give it to me, I'll make copies of it and give it back to everybody the next time I see you. If between now and then you have individual thoughts, shoot it to me in an email, and I'll try to put together something that's representative, and before our next meeting, maybe I send it out, that's proper, right? For people to reflect on. Let's not email each other about our reflections, but I'll send it out for people to reflect on. And then when we come together, we don't have to spend the first half hour reading it, we can start with our commentary on what we've read. Everybody like that?
Our next meeting
You like
is
that?
scheduled for the 23rd. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, this is good,
Molly's giving us the sign that we ought to leave,
Yeah,
because she's
it's-
yawning.
It would have been satisfying to come out with one thing, but taking another week to pull the shared stuff together ultimately might serve us better, down the road.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
And Rebecca, thanks for the cookies.
Yeah, right.
Yes, thank you.
Peter, our next meeting is starting